Welcome to the first lesson on ancient China. So, apologies up front to everybody seeing this probably for the first time, because not only are you at home seeing this, but you're seeing this in class as well, because, well, I just got quarantined myself. We'll see how this works out. So, the question you asked. By this point, you should have done the bell work already. And the question, the first question that talked about basically, have you ever been in a situation where you knew you were better than everybody else, in whatever it was, like you're better at art, you're faster, you know more, just whatever, it doesn't matter. You knew you had more skills or better knowledge of something, and just no one else in the room acknowledged it or knew that or anything like that. And what do you do, or what would you do in that situation? I would say most of us have been in situations like that. We don't like to admit it, but I'd say most of us have been in situations like that. Whether it was true or not is it would probably be up for debate. But the reason why I asked this question is at least trying to get kind of a personal connection to a lot of the thought process you could say if you were to say, well, looking at China over the last few thousand years. So, by the way, the different ways you deal with that when you're in those situations, there's various ways, of course. But simply put, a lot of people would just basically sit back and do nothing. It was like, no skin off my back. Doesn't matter to me. I'll just let someone else do it. By the way, that's usually mine. Not always, but that would be usually the way I deal with it. Mainly because I'm perfectly fine a lot of times thinking that someone else, or not thinking that someone else, but someone else who thinks they're better at something wants to take charge and do all the work to get something done. Well, go ahead. I'm all right with that. I'll help you out as best I can, but go right ahead. I love the fact that you want to take the responsibility, and I don't have to, but I'll help you out. That's usually my thought process. Although I have been in a few times where you get to the other side of things where no, you're getting bugged. Like this means something, meaning like there's going to be consequences to what's going on, and if we don't put our best foot forward, then things will be bad for all of us. So yeah, I might need to pipe up and say I'm good at this. You should have me do this. Doesn't happen that often for me, at least I can remember, but it has. But there are people that are like, that's usually the way it goes. Like, people should just know that I know what I'm doing here, and I know that person knows I'm better, but they're not acknowledging it, and yada, yada, yada. Just, that's kind of the way people deal with those things a little bit. There could be other ways, but that's kind of the two ends of the spectrum, at least. Now, how this applies to China. China has been easily, and I mean easily, especially over the last 2,000 years, the premier civilization, like the greatest civilization type thing. There have not been many other civilizations that really, really held up to China, just in grand, just scope and just grandeur and things like that. It's hard to go down the list of stuff, but they were king of the hill for a long time. Just personally speaking, this is just Mr. Harrison opinion. But really the only civilization you could say that was up there challenging it and maybe outdid China for a bit was the Roman Empire for a bit. And that was a while ago. We're talking 1,800, 2,000 years ago for that as well. So China has done it. They've been up there. That doesn't mean they haven't had their setbacks. It doesn't mean they were this perfect country or anything like that, or if they didn't have all these weird things happening to them. No, not at all. They definitely had some crazy stuff going on over that time. But what I'm getting at is like everybody wanted to go to China. It seemed like everybody knew about China. It seemed like this crazy awesome place. Marco Polo just raved about it. Nobody really believed him that a place could really be like what he explained it as. But it also drove the idea of Europeans to go into the age of exploration. Can we get over there, get to China, get to the Indies, and see what they have? And really, today, you could say the premier civilization, however you want to put that. And I'm not saying this anyways, basically the premier civilization today really is Western civilization. You could say I'm a bit biased on that one, or because I'm part of Western civilization myself, that I'm clouded in my judgment there. But there's a lot of things to go off with that one. Between Europe and the Americas, and just the way the world works today, and just kind of who people look to overall, who has a say in things, it's mostly Western civilization. And for the last 100 years, China has had a bit of an identity crisis, a huge one. They have really struggled and gone through arguably some of the worst times in its history as a people and as a country and everything. And they're just starting to come out of it. You could say, now there's still problems going on, but it's getting to this point where they're becoming a superpower again. Yet the other superpower in the room is basically the United States, the leader of Western civilization. So kind of what do you do there? What happens when you have two big guys on the block type thing? And we've been seeing a bit of tension between China and the United States, a lot on that idea, like how much sphere of influence do you project? How do we work together, but how do we just kind of nudge each other a little bit? Like who really is on top? Who is the one that in the end kind of calls the shots type thing? We've been seeing a lot of examples of that over the last few years, of things like the trade wars, basically cyber warfare going on. China has stolen a bunch of military secrets, so the FBI and CIA tell us. The whole building islands in the South China Sea. This is all kind of things like just nudging a little bit. But then we have things that are kind of awesome. The idea we've had some fairly good trade deals. Our standard of living has gone up because of trade with China, especially over the last 15 years or so. Everything is made in China. It's not necessarily to make fun of. It's the idea that doing that has enabled a huge boost to the world economy in general, not just the United States and China. Anyways, I'm going down this a little bit too much, but basically what I'm trying to say is, for a long time, it was China, and they know it, and so do we. I don't know if you guys really knew that coming into class today, but you need to know that. China was really on top for a very long time, and you could say they got knocked off their perch. You could argue, I'd say probably around the Opium Wars time, about mid-1800s, they got knocked off their perch, but they don't really realize they got knocked off their perch until probably like the early 1900s, 1910s, with the fall of the Qing dynasty, you could say. And they started to try to turn things around, but man, I'm trying not to go too deep into it. Let's putting it in a simple and maybe kind of a more nice way than maybe I should. They've had some setbacks through the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 1980s. But since you could say they've had a bit of rebound. But if you ever watch a Chinese movie or get into Chinese society, they still have this thought process like, we are the best and we're always the best, even when we've had a tough time, a rough go of it for the last 100 years or so. We really are the ones that are on top. So this is the reason why I asked that question. Hopefully it's kind of giving this personal connection into China. This doesn't mean that everybody in China thinks this way. I'm treating China as kind of like it's its own individual entity, and it helps us connect a little bit or have that understanding. But we are seeing that play out a little bit on the geopolitical scale today. So, but that leads into the two major things that we're going to be going into for this unit. First off, I hope that through this I can help you guys recognize just the awesomeness of China. But I personally, this is one area of history that I am very much fascinated by. And I love Chinese history. It was hard to understand in the beginning because it's so different from our background and our understanding of the world around us. But once you kind of get a grasp onto it and you kind of learn a few things, they just have I don't know what other word to use right now, just awesome, just interesting, fantastic history that is fun to go into. And I hope I'm able to relay that to you over the next few lessons that we have in this class. So that being said, the second thing that we're going over in that I'm going to focus on is actually the main core concept for this unit is, what does it take to have a happy society? This is something that Chinese deal with a lot over the last basically 4,000 years. Every society has, not just them, but China is actually one that really has a focus on it. And there's times when they've really failed miserably and times when it seems like they were going pretty well. And we're going to take a look at that and, of course, compare it to our society today and how we look at ourselves versus how the Chinese look at themselves. Because this is a big deal. In the end, when we're talking about civilization, this is a world civilization class. It comes down to, okay, what is a good civilization? What's going to allow for the most happiness possible, where everybody is basically doing good and feeling like things are going well. So, oh, sorry, my phone's starting to ring. I just got to turn it off. So, where was I? Oh, getting into the second question I had you guys is, what do you know about ancient China? I like reading through those just to see what you have. Like, I hope if you knew a lot that you're writing a bit of a novel in there. Maybe you didn't want to take that much time, but it's good for me to see what you know, because just like India in our last unit, China is one of those areas, ancient China is one of those areas where it's hard to get a connection to. It's hard to really, really understand as well when you first start learning about them if you've never learned about them before. That's also, I'm hoping that question, the first Bellwether question, helps you out with that. That being said, going to move on just within the lesson. And basically have your note packets out and follow along with me as best as possible. So, first things first, going over the geography. I don't know if you remember me telling you this story, but where I had a friend in college and I asked him where China was, testing his geography skills, and he pointed to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I was like, you're pointing to a bunch of water, right? He's like, yeah, I heard it's somewhere in there. And like something as big as China is, it's kind of hard to think that someone would think that way, but hey, it's possible. My friend isn't a dummy. He's a smart guy, but it just never was a big deal to him. And so in his mind, it's like it's somewhere over there. I know we already went over the idea of where China is in the beginning of class, but now it's getting to the point where now we need to know specifics about East Asia, not specifics, but some core things. First off, the two rivers. You have the Yellow River right here. That is, by the way, in your notes, please put down, that is where Chinese civilization does begin. It begins on the Yellow River. In fact, right in the crook right here is where they just pop up out of nothing and become the fourth civilization in world history, just to kind of establish themselves on their own without any influences from anybody else whatsoever. Then you have the Yangtze River Valley right here. These are the two big rivers of China that define China in many ways. And a lot of it, just going into this, when we talk about agriculture and like food, well, the Yellow River, they grow a lot of wheat up there. But in the Yangtze River, that's where you get a lot of the rice production and a lot of culture, meals you eat, things like that, diets, you are what you eat type of thing, that define kind of those two sides, and two sides of China. Now, in the Yangtze River Valley, they come around second, you could say, and they connect up into the Yellow River, especially after a big canal is built between the two sides. That doesn't come till later. We're actually not going to talk about that in this lesson, but you need to know that trade is huge. When you get the connection with everybody, you kind of get these melding of societies, and China's no different there. You have this melding of societies between the Yellow River Valley and the Yangtze River Valley over time. And I'll show you that with some maps in just a bit. Now, the Gobi Desert, so I'm told, is actually one of the most impassable deserts in the world up there in northern China and into Mongolia. The Himalaya Mountains, I think I talked about those ones already with India, where that's one of the biggest natural boundaries in the world. And why India and China are so distinct from each other as developed cultures and so different from each other, as opposed to just the rest of the world as well. But if you didn't have those there, China and India could have developed very much in sync with each other. You could say a little bit like the Middle East and Europe did, because you didn't have massive natural boundaries. You had more of a connective flow there, especially with the Mediterranean Sea. But with these two, not as much, and they do develop very distinct from each other. So, last one you need to know, and it's not up here, I'm sorry, is the Tibetan Plateau. It's the largest plateau in the world. Stands about 10 to 12,000 feet high. It's, again, give you a bit of comparison, it's a bit higher than the mountains we have out here, and we think those are big. So, there's the geography for you. And again, make sure you have written down that the Yellow River is where Chinese civilization starts. Now, moving on. it's one thing to talk about kind of what China has or to memorize where places are. It's another thing to look at it. And I do feel like these pictures help, and I'll give you just a couple things as we go through here. This is Tibet. So that big plateau I was just talking about earlier. Not necessarily a flat place, but, well, let's put it this way. I've gone to China once before. It was awesome. Absolutely loved it. I want to go there again. One of the places I didn't get to go to was Tibet. This is definitely on my bucket list of places to visit. This place I did get a chance to go down. This is called the Guilin River Valley. It's a huge tourist spot to go to. In fact, when China did start opening itself up to the rest of the world in the late 1900s, this is one of the first places that said, hey, come here. If you want to experience an awesome part of China, come do a little cruise down this river. And it is amazing. This picture really doesn't do it justice, and how awesome it was just to sit there, be on that boat, and just look out for about 4 to 5 hours. I was on that river to just see it. But I do want to explain a little bit of the formations there. Very unique. If this makes sense in your mind, basically that was kind of flat land up towards the top, and then over time the loose dirt eroded away, and then you kind of like the stronger soils and rock stayed in place, and hence for the formations. The only other place that I know of in the world that has formations like that is actually here in the southwestern United States, like Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and stuff like that, or southern Utah, I should say, where you get like the whole Lake Bonneville thing, just eroded out tons of stuff. We got these massive canyon walls, but also some formations that aren't necessarily like that, but a little bit like that, where they were eroded around. So anyways, we got, basically you could say we kind of got like the desert version of it. They got the paradise version of it. Now, this is just a picture of the Gobi Desert. The one main reason I'm showing this isn't just the idea that, like, hey, they say this desert is one of the most impassable deserts there is. But if you're getting the idea, I just showed you 3 very different landscapes and environments. A lot of times when we think of a place that we don't really know much about, we maybe see a picture of it, and that's all we think that place is like. France is always just this place of kind of rolling green hills and forests and stuff like that. And when you have a smaller country like Switzerland, just made up of mountains type thing. When you have smaller countries like that, less geographic area or land, less land basically. They might have just kind of that one environment mostly. But China, as like the United States, is massive in its size and have a lot of different environments. So it's very different to go from one part of China to another. It's not all the same, basically. I hope you already knew that, but if you were like me in high school, it needed to be pointed out. So this I like to show. One, this is actually a kind of like how would I put it? Like a sacred lake. But I show it because, well, if I wouldn't have known better, I thought I would be looking at a place up in North Idaho that you go hike to, like do a nice camp out in, or the Wind River Mountains or something like that, or the Blue Mountains in Oregon, or the Cascade Mountains in Washington and Oregon. And the reason why I'll show another picture like this, but there's a lot of scenery or things you see in China that look a lot like here, even when it comes down to specific flora and fauna, basically plants and flowers and things like that, and trees. So, but this, not so much. And I'd like to explain a little bit with this one. This is down towards the Yangtze River Valley, by the way, an offshoot river area. But the Chinese, if you're wondering why they have so many dang people, this is a big part of it. They utilize every bit of the land they could for food production. It is impressive. I grew up being told that it was the Incas that started terrace farming something like 1,000 years ago or so. And it was amazing they did that. And it was amazing that they did that, especially at the elevation level that they did it at. But apparently the Chinese have been doing this for 3,000-4,000 years. Definitely the first people ever to just look at a landscape and say, how do we turn this into food production? It is quite amazing. I had a chance to hike through areas like this, and it was really cool to look at. Let's put it that way. It looked like a big piece of artwork, but at the same time it was in the land itself. Pretty crazy. By the way, those are all like rice paddies, if you were wondering what they are. Now this is the other picture I was referring to earlier, where it's like, if you didn't know I was showing you pictures about China, you'd probably be thinking I was showing you a picture of like the redwood forest in Northern California, or again like the Cascades the forests of the Cascade Mountain Range of the western United States. These are massive trees and massive forests. This is in Manchuria, China, which is which is located in northeast China today. And there's a lot of things that speak to this idea of the flora and fauna seems to be the same. I've heard explanations like, well, maybe at some point seeds and things like that were blown across the Pacific Ocean and somehow got over here, or maybe someone sailed across and brought them with them, or maybe this was something when Pangea was together. Again, there's so many different things that go along with this, like why do you have a lot of this similar look between two very opposite sides of the world? And, well, it just comes down to a lot of speculation. So, this is something that was incredibly unique to East Asia. When I say East Asia, I'm not just talking China, but Japan and Korea. China, Japan, and Korea basically take their bamboo forests as like national treasures. And I hardly ever see anything they do, like a movie or anything where they're doing something with nature, even like K-pop videos, where they don't at some point have people in a bamboo forest kind of showing that off. And hey, I would be too. So that's actually something I did not get the chance to go through myself when I was in China. Another thing on my bucket list. Now, actually finally getting into the history. Hopefully seeing the pictures and hearing my explanations was a little bit helpful there, and just kind of setting the tone for what China is like, just landscape-wise, environment-wise, just in the grand nature of just the land itself. But the history. Take a look at the dates right now, and hopefully you're getting the idea that you're looking at Chinese history that we're going to be covering in this class is going to span across about 2,500 years, about. And we have 5 dynasties. Now, just to put this a little bit in perspective, with these 5 dynasties, well, that's 5 dynasties. Remember what the definition of a dynasty is, which you also need to remember for this unit as well. It's a period of time where one family is in charge. Now, when we talked about Egypt, Egypt was dominant for about 2,000 years. Way before China started. But the idea is that the realm of time is what I'm talking about. So 2,500 years of Chinese time and dynasties versus 2,000 years of Egyptian time and dynasties. And I told you that Egypt had 31 dynasties in a period of 2,000 years. And then we look at 2,500 years of Chinese history, and they have just 5. Now, this doesn't, again, mean that everything was hunky-dory, and especially if you see that nice little warring states period thing right there. We're going to talk a lot about that period. But this speaks to major stability, that China was able to just say, this is how it is. We're going to stay as consistent as we can, and we'll make this work. This is the way things are. Now, the reasons why this comes about, and we'll talk about this later, one of the main things is something called the Mandate of Heaven, which we won't get into in this lesson necessarily, most likely in the next one. But this does speak to a sense of major, major stability. That Zhou dynasty itself, if you're looking at the dates there, basically lasts around 900 years. Again, the last 200 years were not happy times, but technically you did have one family in control, you could say, or at the top for 900 years, the Zhou family. By the way, I feel like I need to go through this. And if anybody's in the class that speaks Chinese much better than I do, because I haven't taken Chinese, go ahead and correct it for the class. But the first dynasty, that's not the Xia dynasty, it's the Xia dynasty. Shang dynasty, just pronounced Shang. Then the third one is not the Zhao dynasty. I've already said this one a couple times, but it's the Zhou dynasty. I know, whoever decided to come up with English to Chinese translations, not cool. But anyways, because the next one, you feel like even worse. You don't pronounce that the Qin dynasty or Qin dynasty, like it would look like. That's what we'd sound it out in our minds, but that is the Qin dynasty. It really should be spelled with a CH, and it used to. I don't know why they switched it. But then the Han dynasty, that's an easy one, kind of like Han Solo. That's 2,500 years of just major stability. Now, we're only going to briefly talk about the Xia dynasty, and then we'll be done with this lesson. I totally forgot about this. Have one more major concept to talk about. In fact, then we actually might talk about the Xia dynasty next time. We'll see. But the Xia dynasty, it's tiny. That's the first dynasty in Chinese history where we say that if there's Chinese civilization, it is very tiny. I hope you're seeing that little dot in the middle, gray or whatever dot. Whatever color you think that is. It's tiny on the Yellow River. By the time you get to the Shang Dynasty, much, much bigger. I'm going to explain that in a second, how that happens. It's not normal, let's put it that way. Turns into the Zhou Dynasty. Zhou Dynasty expands a bit, and then the Zhou Dynasty just decides to have, well, let's kill each other moment with the Warring States period. So then when the dust settles, you get to the Qin Dynasty, and hey, look, it's spelled with a CH. That's definitely from my time growing up. All my textbooks had it spelled with a CH. Not anymore, apparently. By the way, this is where you do get the name China from, is from the Qin Dynasty. So do we start spelling China as Q-I-N-A now? Anyways, sorry, I'm being a turkey. So notice the Great Wall of China there. It's great. The Qin Dynasty is not a long-lasting dynasty. But this is where you get things like the Great Wall of China, the Terracotta Soldiers, and a few of the big things that happen within about the just under 20-year reign of the Qin Dynasty. But then that moves into the Han Dynasty, and they expand out even more. So, but this is how far we're going to get to the beginnings of Chinese civilization, to where they get into this classical era of the Han Dynasty. And they're now established as, like, basically, once you get to the Han Dynasty, they are that premier civilization that I was referencing at the beginning of this lesson. So, at this point, I think I'm going to end this video here just because it's a bit long, especially for those of you online. And I will see you in the next one.